This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 90.
So sometimes being a great professional, you have to be a a habitual disruptor in a professional way. You have to do the opposite of what others are telling you to do. You can't be the traditional educator.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here along with my co-host, Mr. Matt, the vulnerable teacher Rogers. Matt, how we doing, my friend? And there is our other guest co-host for the night. You will hear a cricket in the background in my unfinished basement as the studio of Ken journey continues. And this cricket, you will hear
the entire show
episode.
So please, turn the volume down a little bit so it's not the prevailing noise that you get, like it's coming through my ears. Ken, I will be honest. We've done probably 84 episodes together, right around there, that I've been able to join you for. And I left that interview feeling, vulnerable, as you used it, the most vulnerable that I've ever left an interview, an opportunity to have a conversation, because at the end of this, I realized that I have kind of fallen into this belief that I'm doing great things for kids, even if I've fallen into bad habits. We're recording this very much at the beginning of the school year, and we have that opportunity to reset what we're doing. And I have found myself, I get questioned at the end of this episode of whether or not I trust my kids. I don't want to tell you that I'm lying when I answer that, but I don't know there's an answer I want to say, and that might be a different answer than what I actually feel. And so I think the pursuit of how do I get to that, and please listen for the context of the why behind that. But I think that leaves us reflecting, hey, it's a new opportunity. Last year, I felt like I crushed those opportunities. This is a new opportunity that I need to match or exceed. And matching is still successful, or reaching for the same thing is still successful by all means. But yeah, this was a unexpected counseling session, and unexpected redirecting of my career. Just a fantastic interview.
It really was, and Anthony Swann brought so much depth to everything that we talked about. Not that I really feel any guest we've ever had does, but there are times where you see a speaker or you hear someone and they fluff their way through everything, and that is the opposite of what Anthony did. And he made it very clear and evident why relationships matter with students. We hear that from almost all of our guests, that relationships are important, that it comes before curriculum, and I've always been in agreement with that, and most educators are. But Anthony makes it very clear and obvious with specific stories, specific reasons why it's so important. And so there was so much to our conversation that I feel will be valuable for any teacher to listen to, his reflections as a teacher, as well as a coach and now a building leader. And so I really just can't wait to jump right into this conversation for our audience. So without delaying any further, let's jump into that conversation with the 2021 Virginia Teacher of the Year, Anthony Swann.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Hi, Anthony. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Hope you are.
Absolutely. So we're excited to have you here. Kick things off. Keep it simple for us. Just officially introduce yourself. Let us know where you are coming from and give us a snapshot of your career in education.
Okay. My name is Anthony Swann. I currently reside in Benton, Virginia, which is a suburb of Roanoke, Virginia. I am a 16-year educating veteran. I've taught every elementary grade except kindergarten. I've been an instructional coach, and now I'm serving as an assistant principal at Monterey Elementary, and just love children.
Awesome. So I started my career teaching second grade for a brief LTS position filling in for maternity leave. And then I jumped into fifth grade, and I kind of had a little of an experience when I taught STEM with every grade level. So I want you to give us your favorite grade level in elementary that if you had to decide now for the grade level you're going to teach for the rest of your career, what would it be and why would you choose that grade level?
It'll probably be fifth grade because I've taught fifth grade the longest. I was able to connect more with the fifth graders. They're more independent. They're impressionable. However, they're able to utilize their voice to let you know how they need to be served. So I would choose fifth grade.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question. I've used this in parent-teacher conferences enough, but I've only ever taught fourth grade. So I will use your expertise. There is a threshold where kids learn how to do school and then they turn into learners of content. I always, tell the parents that threshold happens around fourth grade. But in your kind of experience, where do you see, maybe your advanced learners in second or third grade, they're ready to really jump into the content compared to, the repetition of what school seems like, acts like, all of those features that they have to acquire to really be successful in those upper elementary grades?
So, can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. No, so I guess my question is, do you see a shift from your years in the variety of grade levels from what it seems like to learn how to school transitioning into, we're really getting into content. I'm asking you to remember something from 3 weeks ago that you're going to apply in this math class or, a literary skill, those type things.
Yes, I actually do. So sometimes, even from a teacher's perspective, if you don't teach a testing grade, quote unquote, it's not like as pertinent to you. But when you are teaching a testing grade, you expect for the children to perform higher. You expect for them to remember the content. So I would like, especially teaching like the older elementary. Sometimes I found myself reminding them, okay, guys, this is a second grade skill. Let's, so seeing that shift from the lower elementary to the upper elementary, I definitely saw that, especially teaching fifth grade for so long. And so I found myself as a teacher reminding them what kind of skill it is because I knew the curriculum for the lower grades. So you definitely do see that shift in the upper elementary. Did I answer your question?
You did. Can
Okay.
I follow up kind of with that?
Absolutely.
So do you feel like, and I don't know necessarily your timeline of those grades, do you feel like it was more helpful to have taught the lower grades and know the foundational skills when you taught fifth and sixth, or like upper elementary? or was it more helpful to know what they were going to be leading to and almost kind of back map that to a younger grade?
I would say it was more beneficial for me to have taught the younger grades first, because I could then teach across the curriculum. So if I'm in the upper grades, I learned how to scaffold back down to where a student was currently learning, even though I'm in the upper grades. So that definitely helped me to teach the younger grades first, so I'll know how to differentiate my instruction.
That makes total sense. Sorry, I'm coming at you with like some
No,
deep
you're good.
questions right on. I know, like when we think about changing grade levels, a lot of times you hear teachers being like, "Oh, I'm going from sixth to fourth grade. I know where they're heading to," or I was a second grade teacher. I'm being asked to go to third or fifth grade. I know that they at this point have learned what they needed to. That now it's just make the text level or the vocabulary more difficult, or just expand on those skills that I think we're always looking to pull from general teaching experience. But I just, from your background, wondering which is that preferred. I think I would have guessed what you were saying, which is I know where I'm coming from, and then we're just going to expand on that with more challenging words, language that's a little bit more challenging. So
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of continue on that theme of the conversation, when you were moving from grade level to grade level, what did you find was common practice for you as a teacher that extended past all those grade levels, whether that be your style of classroom management, the way you formed relationships? What if you were to coach a teacher who is moving grade levels, what would you tell them to tap into, a second grade teacher moving to fifth, or even a fifth moving down to first? What would you encourage them to say? Like, you're a veteran teacher, this and this, it's going to come with you. It doesn't matter that you're changing grade levels. What are those components of your instructional practice that you felt just carried from grade level to grade level?
Very good question. The greatest one is Maslow before Bloom. So making sure you attend to the students' human needs first, building those relationships. No matter if you're teaching first grade, they love the hugs, they love the attention. But if you jump over to fifth grade, they love the attention, but just in a different way. They love the fact that you actually care about me as a person, as a human being first. Like, you don't fuss at me because I'm sleepy. You actually let me sleep first, and then you let me get caught up on my work. Like, you let me eat in the classroom because I do be hungry, and you don't fuss at me because I'm eating snacks because I'm still paying attention. So just making sure that I attend to the human needs of my children first. That has been my greatest, and the relationship building piece. Um, Exhausting all measures to reach children where they are. Instead of at the drop of a dime writing a child up, see why they are acting the way that they're acting. Have a conversation with them. Allow them to talk to you. So don't automatically write a child up. So those are the more humanistic things. Academically, just delve into the curriculum and study the curriculum in depth, and making sure that you can unpack every standard, to make sure that the student actually understands beyond the surface level. So those are some of the things, even coming from a lower grade to an upper elementary grade, that I utilized. Um, and one of the greatest things, I had to focus on the children, because adults will get on your nerves. This profession will make you want to quit because of so many of behind the scenes things going on. But just focusing on my children helped me to stay grounded.
I love that. We've never had anyone talk about Maslow versus Bloom's, and I love that. So just to clarify for our audience, can you, a couple sentences define Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Bloom's taxonomy?
Absolutely. So with Maslow's research is saying that you should attend to the humanistic needs of your children before basically the academic needs. If your children are hungry, if your children are sleepy, if your children don't have shoes to wear, they're not worried about what making an A or B in your class. They're more worried about, how am I going to survive? I didn't eat dinner last night. I'm hungry. So making sure that you address those needs first, and then you move into the Bloom's taxonomy, and you move into the critical thinking skills and the collaboration and all those other academic pieces. But you have to make sure that you attend to those humanistic needs first before you teach the student.
Perfect. Thank you. And a simple thing that you share, just if you're hungry, then eat in the classroom. I think as we've transitioned back into normal school, I think everyone feels that we're back to normal school for the most part from everything that was going on with the pandemic. A lot of it is getting these kids kind of retrained on school, similar to what you were talking about, Matt. And I feel like at times we're seeing way too much restrictions put on kids, like serious restrictions put on how often they're able to go to the bathroom, hall passes, when they're able to do all of these basic things. And I remember seeing a quote on Twitter from Weston Kieschnick, who's a great speaker and author, something along the lines of, if we can't trust our kids to decide when to go to the bathroom, how are we going to trust them to decide how to learn and how to be independent learners? Something along those lines. And I apologize for not having the quote exact, but thinking back to my classroom, like I had the same policy. I said, bring a lunch, bring a snack, bring 10 snacks. I don't really care. You can eat all day for all I care, as long as you're doing the work. I'm not going to ask you, is that your lunch or your snack? Like, you can be responsible enough to decide when you're going to eat your lunch and your snack that your parents picked out for you or that you packed yourself. Just giving them that comfort in, one, if they're hungry, then they're not going to be hungry anymore. And two, just saying, like, I trust you. I trust you to make a simple decision of when you're going to eat the food that you brought yourself. I'm not going to bring a snack for you. That's your decision. Now, if there were kids that needed it, obviously, but just those simple things, like you said, that layer of trust may change grade level to grade level, and that level of freedom might change grade level to grade level with what students can handle. But bringing that into your classroom, I just think is so important.
So can I kind of ask both of you, we have a pocket of people that listen that are fairly new teachers, and, they push along the basic needs. So Anthony, or the basic expectations, they are initial teachers, how they expect that they need to be. And Ken, hearing your perspective of, I totally agree. If a kid's hungry and wants to eat all day long, if they're doing the work, it doesn't change one aspect of my classroom. And Anthony, from your end, what I'm hearing is I need to attend to what they are probably focused on that's distracting them from being, able to be an active member of my classroom community. So two kind of parts to that. So first off, Ken and Anthony, how do you gain that confidence early on to say, I believe in this and I'm going to stick to it, even if, the classroom next door doesn't have the same policy? Breaking away can feel really uncomfortable and a risk. And the second part of it is, when you break away, what are those boundaries you're setting? Anthony, I'm hearing these, Maslow's needs, and I'm thinking, do I need to get a minor in social work, that I'm sourcing all of these things to support my kids? And in some capacity, yes, it's one of those jobs we play. So how do you manage how much you're doing to attend to those needs? If a kid needs to sleep, be my guest. If the kid is able to bring food, if the kid is able to access shoes and what have you, how are you supporting those low levels of Maslow's needs without ruffling, the professional way to be a teacher, especially as an early, I haven't pushed the boundaries quite yet type teacher?
Go first, Ken, or you want me to go first?
I'll go first with the confidence, and then you can add to that, and then you can add on the piece of just attending to the individual needs, if that's okay. So in terms of confidence, I think it's just knowing what your purpose is. And so, again, I wanted my students to feel that I trusted them. I wanted them to feel that this was their space. It was not my space. And so, just being very explicit with why I was managing the class that way, and also what the expectations were. in terms of the food thing, I didn't care what they ate and when they ate it, but I told them, don't eat your lunch and then complain at lunch that you're hungry. You need to make that decision yourself. Or if you're not hungry at lunch and you want to finish it after lunch, that's fine with me. Don't cause problems in the cafeteria because you're not actively eating your lunch. If you're having a snack, let's think about what that snack should be. I shouldn't see you coming in with some gourmet feast that requires you to, use a fork and a knife, and, you have dipping sauces. Like, make sure it's not a distraction from your work. So just being very clear and explicit with what I expected. And beyond that, I didn't really care what it was. And if there was something that was out of line, tell the person. It's, or don't leave a mess at the table. Like, clean up after. Like, just having those clear expectations, I think that's where the confidence came in. And just knowing that if it wasn't going how I wanted, it could be corrected. And so, it was similar. I let the students work in the hallway all the time. Anytime they were doing independent work, they were able to go in the hallway, getting clear expectations. This is what I expect. If I have a teacher complain about you being in the hallway, it's done. If the principal comes and says, what are your kids doing in the hallway? Why are they acting that way? It's done. But to what you said, Matt, about like not happening with my colleagues, no one did that in my hallway when I started there. When I left there, every teacher sent their students out into the hallway for independent work. And it was actually like a positive working environment where their students were engaged. And so I think I've always said, if you're doing something from a place of this is best for my students because, and you can finish that statement, then
Pretty
you should be
easy to
confident in
justify.
what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Totally agree. As far as the boundaries part, you set those boundaries. Like, you let the children tell you what they need. For instance, I've had colleagues to disagree with me before about letting the children eat in my class, and I would just basically turn it back on them and say, if this was your child, would you want your child in school hungry? Would you want your child in school complaining because they can't concentrate because their stomach is growling? No. And then taking on the personal ownership of, these are my children. And so I know I'm not their father, but they've been entrusted in my care for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so I'm going to do what's best for my children. Never did I have children in my class complaining that they were hungry because they were allowed to eat. So sometimes, being a great professional, you have to be a habitual disruptor in a professional way. You have to do the opposite of what others are telling you to do. You can't be the traditional educator and say, no, you're not going to eat and drink in my room. No, you're not going to do this in my room. That generations change. And so you have to be able to change and adapt with generations to meet their needs. We want people to listen to us when we need something. So it is okay to be a professional and ask your children, what is it that you need? How can I help you? Where are you? Are you hungry? Are you sleepy? Let's address that need so we can make sure that you can be your best self.
So I guess a few things. First off, I love how, like, you could just hear the passion talking about your kids really being, the backbone of your passion right there. Like, just
And
the
I
way you
love that
said it.
soundbite of habitual disruptor.
Oh,
I
I
love
mean,
that.
that right there, is the passion that we get into the career for, to, care for other human beings. It is a pleasure to go, I may have gray hairs, but it is a pleasure to get to go in and deal with my kids day in and day out. They drive me crazy, but I love it. It is an opportunity that we take, right? That is the beauty of this profession. So I guess I do want to ask, if you hear these glaring needs, you're like, they're my kids and my bank account is only so big. How do you feel? Like, what are those extents that you feel like you can go to the community or your school or to family? Like, how do you best support kids, especially when you see a glaring need and you yourself may not be able to handle solving that directly?
Very good question. So from I partner with other educators. For instance, my there was she's now my wife. She's a teacher as well, but we were teaching at this school, and she was teaching uh, first grade, and I was teaching fourth grade, and we had both of the siblings, and so the mom came to us and was like, "Christmas is coming. I can't do anything. I'm stretched to the thing. I'm a single mom," and so my now wife and I, we bought all of their Christmas, took it to their house on Christmas Eve while they were asleep, put it underneath their tree. Um, Now that I'm an assistant principal, just learning from the tutelage of my principal, we utilize our PTA. We have a student needs fund. We have a closet that is full of, we call it our snack closet, but it's full of food. It has shoes in it. If a parent comes to us and say, I don't know what I'm going to do, we utilize those outside resources to help us meet the needs of our families and our children, because those things come first. Children say all the time, I'm hungry. So we want to make sure that we meet that need. So we utilize those outside forces. Um, my wife has put some personal things on her Facebook page, and she'll put a list of snacks that she needs in her class for her children, and people will end up cash apping her so that she can go to Sam's Club to get those snacks. So just reaching out to those people want to help, especially if they know that you're utilizing the money or the resources for the children, and you give them evidence and that documentation that's what it's for.
Absolutely. And something I love the story of what you and your wife did for that family, which is incredible. I walked into an assistant principal's office in our district, and he was giving a pair of his son's old football cleats to a kid in the school who the situation was obvious that I'm assuming that kid could not afford a new pair of cleats. I think he was like a size 13 or 14. So even more difficult to find a pair of cleats like that. And he just gave him like brand new college issued cleats that his son wasn't using anymore. So those little things like we can do will completely change the lives of children when they can reflect back on that or remember that, or those parents who know what you did for their children. But I would encourage our audience to be aware of the situations that our students are in. Some of our listeners are probably coming from districts where there's a high level of Title I students or students below the poverty line that are free and reduced lunch, all those pieces where you can look and say, I teach in a community where we have 60, 70, 80% on free and reduced lunch. But even the ones that are not so high, talk to your guidance counselors about your students and their family situations, because I was definitely naive of that my first couple of years until I grew up a little bit and became more mature and realized that some of my students were coming from really rough and tough situations. And whether you're just a little bit more empathetic, circles back to what you said about letting the kids sleep. Like if their home life is really rough, they might not be going to bed at an appropriate time. They might not be woken up at an appropriate time, or there might be stressors at night keeping them awake. So just being aware of all that, whether or not you're emptying your own wallet, you're supporting, you're getting involved with the PTO, like you said, there's a lot of resources out there. But even just being more empathetic with the students that need it, I just think is so important. And I was definitely naive of that, in my first couple of years of teaching.
I want to just kind of piggyback off that, talking about you're naive. I feel like we all are. I think we really struggle with, Anthony, you were mentioning, the judgment, the initial, we're almost expecting low expectations because of whatever those circumstances are that we don't understand. So when trying to have the conversation to lead to teacher empathy. We have the, hey, I need to cover this curriculum. I feel stressed that I'm behind where I'm supposed to be. I have these behaviors acting out. And when I'm only viewing it from surface level, kid acting out is interfering from instruction. Realistically, we, with getting into that career, can start to empathize, can start to understand, a lot of the behavior is rooted, maybe it's instructions challenging, maybe instructions boring because they're advanced. Those two areas lead to a lot of behaviors, or sometimes the behaviors are completely unrelated to anything in school. So how do you kind of bridge that conversation now in your current position to, it's so much easier to say, hey, consider that they have outside factors. What is that conversation like to open up the mind of a newer teacher to, hey, I don't want you to have low expectations, just have consideration? Or what are strategies that you use that continue to foster relationship connection, as opposed to, again, I almost want to go back to that classic teacher, the buttoned up sweater style, the stick that they slap on the desk to get attention and hands folded on desk. How do we kind of avoid that picture of education and really embody good quality connection and instruction?
That is a very good question. So, one of the greatest things that I do or I use is myself. And I say myself because of my background and the trauma that I experienced as an elementary child, and how it was my fourth grade teacher that saved my life. And so I open up and I tell them everything that I went through in elementary school, having a drug addicted mom, a mom who was an alcoholic, a father who was always absent, witnessing my mom get arrested, me being taken away into foster care at age 9 in the middle of my class by social services. So I open up with my experiences, which causes a lot of professionals to look at me like, wow, like really? Seriously? I didn't know that. And so when they do that, I say, exactly. There are some of our children that deal with the same things, but you would not know it unless you get to know them and ask them, why are you acting out like this? What is going on? What is happening? Talk to me. But children will not trust teachers until teachers can show them that they're human. What do I mean by that? Teachers have to be able to admit when they're wrong. Teachers have to be able to allow children to have a voice and say, no, I disagree with you. Can we talk about this? Teachers have to allow children to be their own advocate and teach them how to be their own advocate. That is something that I utilized when I was a teacher, is I always told my children, if I ever correct you and I'm wrong, raise your hand and say, Mr. Swann, can we talk after class? And I've corrected children before. We've talked after class and I realized that I was wrong. I would go back the next day and apologize in front of the class because I corrected them in front of the class, just to let the other children know I'm going to listen to you. I'm not always right. And so it causes the children to open up and trust you. And so helping my teachers now to realize the same thing, like, hey, our children don't have perfect lives. They're going through trauma too. So before you decide to die on the heel of giving them a 0 or making them do their homework at recess, ask them, do you have help with homework at home? If not, okay, you set a time, some time in the classroom and help them get their homework done instead of making it a quote unquote punishment. So helping the teachers especially those veteran teachers, to realize that, hey, you need to consider the fact that everybody does not have a perfect life. And so before you correct, you need to connect, because you cannot correct until you connect with your children.
You are just dropping soundbite after soundbite. I love what you're sharing, and the correct before connect is, I'm sorry, connect before correct is such a simple way to look at that. And teaching kids to be advocates for themselves, I think, is so important. And there's so many ways to do it, even instructionally. Just constantly encouraging them to ask questions, ask for help, setting up systems where they can ask for help and be encouraged to do so. But the way that you so humbly apologize in front of the class, I think, is so important. And I can think back to times where I did that, and I don't know that I was doing it intentionally to create that connection with the students, but we're role models for them, and we have to do our best to be the best role model possible and be the best person possible for that. So I could talk all night about the way you're setting up culture and the way you're connecting with students, but I do want to transition a little bit into more of the instructional side. You were an instructional coach, and although I'm sure that this was part of it, these conversations, you also had to be a really good instructional teacher from a pedagogy standpoint, to obtain that position. So, what would you say was your superpower instructionally in your classroom, that the way you facilitated your classroom maximized the teaching and learning going on in your classroom, aside from the relationships? Because I know that's important, establishing those relationships first, but at the end of the day, you still got to be really good at teaching to accomplish good results.
Right. So I love to sing, so I would sing a lot. I would create songs to help my children to remember, especially like doing assessments. I can see children singing the songs in their head and they're moving their head. I have kids that I taught years ago, and they're in their 20s now, and if I run into them, they're like, "Mr. Swann, I remember the water cycle song." So creating songs and singing to them, um, allowing them space to ask questions in a safe way. So I created a parking lot, and if children needed to ask a question and they weren't comfortable asking out loud, they wrote their question on a sticky note, and when they left the room, they put it on the parking lot, and I addressed it the next day. Um, Utilizing technology and the differentiation of instruction, small groups, making sure that I scaffold my instruction. So if I have a fifth grader and they're reading on the third grade level, I'm going to teach them on the third grade level so I can, move the needle and help them to grow to where they need to be, instead of saying, no, you're a fifth grader, you should know how to read this. Just meeting them where they're at. I was the type of teacher that teachers, number one, we don't receive a professional salary. And so I signed up for Boys and Girls Club, which was at my school. And I tutored with Boys and Girls Club, my group of children, because I knew their needs. So I would tutor after school. Um, During the pandemic, we did Saturday school. I signed up to do Saturday school. So I'm just very invested in what I do. I love it. I've always wanted to do it. And so um, those are just some of the things and some of the techniques that I utilize within the classroom to help with my instruction. I also leaned on my instructional coach. Um, I made it a teachable moment. One particular lesson I was teaching in the math, and I didn't know how to do something. So I called my instructional coach. He came in the classroom and he showed me how to do it in front of the children, and it became a teachable moment for them to say, hey, your teacher doesn't know everything, but look at me, I'm learning, I'm asking questions. And so it caused them to be more comfortable, like, oh wow, you're right, so let me ask questions, so just modeling for the children. Yeah, I can keep going, but those are just some of the few.
I just think about that the vulnerability that you're sharing here, and how that resonates and could easily get your kids on board. And whether, like you said, bringing someone in that could explain something and, hey guys, it's okay, I don't know, this is me again, what you were saying, advocating for, I want you to learn, and I'm gonna win as well out of this experience that is just kind of a beautiful thing. I guess what that kind of leads me to is, like, first off, I feel like, your view on things, when Ken asked what is your superhero, skill in teaching, is really just being a hero to kids, putting the time in that you invest in kids as the priority, and that just shines through all the way down. I guess when I talk about instruction, I know Ken and I get the chance to talk about instruction. A lot of times we hear so much more about how we deliver content than the focus of content. And too often we get, at least, we had a guest on here that talked about our primary job is really the art of teaching and less the science of teaching. And when you move into that instructional coach role, or when you move into that curriculum role, yeah, you can be more of that science of teaching component. So singing and, activating their minds and making connections, they make their own connections with their own experiences, we know is good teaching practice. So when kind of considering those, arts of teaching and those, how did you feel like you saw kids growing because you put that extra effort out to make that connection, compared to what a lot of us deal with today, which is, here's a scripted curriculum that it can tell me literally when to take a breath. I think we're up against a lot of challenge with making Mr. Swann's class sound like Mr. Swann's class, regardless of what that curriculum looks like.
Very good point. So yeah. First of all, I'm sorry because your question just slipped my mind.
Okay. So I guess really it comes down to, like, what is your way to take, curriculum and shift it to be, a Mr. Swann style lesson, and even if that's, the freedom that you're giving your teachers now to say, insert your own personality. The content is going to be good if it reflects how you want to teach.
Right. So I allow the children to help me to do some of the things, or they take ownership in that way. Like when I'm creating songs, I look at the curriculum and I look at, the essential knowledge that they have to use, and I look at some of the vocabulary in it, and I include some of the vocabulary um, like in the lyrics of the song, and so I have them to create like the tempo. We practice the tempo as a class, and then I'll write out the lyrics, and then they'll say, okay, this word rhymes with this word, and then we'll just kind of just create the song, and I'll sing it, allowing them to. That's the ownership of it, right? So it won't all be on me. Um, I was teaching within this particular district, and it predominantly had like a lot of farmers, a lot of students who hunted and things like that. So teaching the perimeter and area and all of those things. So we created a farm. And so it caused them to be more intrigued. And in the farm, they had to create a fence and measure the perimeter of that fence and measure the area. So making it connect to their real life experiences, it helped them to be more invested within the learning, and they wanted to do it rather than them just hearing a lecture. I allowed them to do more of the work. So when they went home, they were saying, I'm tired, and not me.
How did you find, as you progressed your teaching in that way, because I can relate to you on a lot of what you're saying, I found that more and more I moved towards the students getting to the more creative fun stuff as a part of the learning process, as opposed to a summative of the learning process, which I feel like is commonplace for teachers. They get to that creative aspect of the lesson or the unit if there's time after they've taught everything. And I try to encourage teachers, and I work with teachers on no, let's dial this back. Let's insert creativity. Let's insert the open-endedness. Let's insert the students leading the instruction during the learning process, and that's where we can create those opportunities. So I kind of got that from what you were saying about the area and perimeter. So any tips on how you can be more comfortable with that, or how you can find ways to allow the students to learn the content through the process versus learning the content and then having some type of process?
Absolutely. So first of all, what teachers have to do is they have to relinquish control. We are control freaks when it comes down to our classroom. This is my classroom. I want it this way. I want it that way. But really, in all actuality, it's not your classroom. It's the kids' classroom. So you have to allow the children to learn from each other more so than learning from you. You have to allow them to talk about the curriculum. You have to allow them to think outside of the box. For instance, like teaching math, there's more than just one way of getting the answer. So don't just take off points because the children didn't do the math problem the way that you taught it. As long as they get to the correct answer, let them get to the correct answer. It calls them to be critical thinkers. It causes them to think outside of the box. And that is why we're educators, because we want to push that so that our children can grow within their academic selves and be their best selves. So, yeah.
Matt, I know this is something you struggle with. So I want you to share what you've tried a little bit, or ask another question to get your own help, because I know this is something that you and I go back and forth on, where you're very summative in those opportunities for your students.
I'm not saying that I'm proud of being summative, it's just
and I'm not saying you shouldn't be.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I know it's something you want to grow away from all the time.
Correct. Yeah, it's the function of how my classroom is structured right now. And so to break from the rhythm of that, the kids find a rhythm of what to expect. That is comforting in its own right. And so predominantly, like, I'm not a small group rotation teacher. That's not how my groups work. That's not how my classroom works. And I'm super lucky. I have a fantastic student teacher. So I am being forced to have, at least 2 small groups at, a predominantly large portion of my day. But so much of my instruction is built from this idea of provide the instruction, and then I get to witness it in action. And I then pull, or my student teacher, Anthony, pulls, kids and kind of looks at that targeted support. And that's where the tutoring or the additional support happens that leads to a summative. Realistically, the summative, I don't care about. The summative is the moments before, or I guess the moments after the direct instruction, that I'm witnessing is a kid jumping in and seeming to get it or not. Right then is where I'm, assessing and pulling. But part of that, as you were saying, Anthony, comes down to being a control freak. I absolutely, one of my biggest things that I've been struggling with is giving up responsibility to my student teacher, a very competent young man who is dynamite. Like, I am so lucky to be in this position, but I'm sitting there being jealous of his opportunity to run that classroom, and jealous is a very strong word. I am enjoying this immensely, but that's part of education. I think all the time about how I'm going to go in and rock those kids' world and take, the study of metamorphic rock and make that the coolest thing that we've ever covered. That is the joy in teaching. With that being the case, I also know that when it's in kids' hands, the product is usually way better than when I'm directing it. So
can I challenge you?
Yeah, please do. I'm ready for it.
I want to challenge you, and knowing that, so challenge you to work along with your student teacher instead of sitting back, like saying, but this is my room. These are my children. Like, instead of doing that, like, work with him. Like, when he's teaching, you pull a small group. Like, you guys feed off of each other. Like, if his energy is high, okay, you're in there, your energy is high, because the ultimate goal is to reach the needs of the children. And so, um, so my next question to you is, do you really trust the children? And the reason why I ask that is because a teacher who trusts the children will relinquish the control. They will trust them to meet their expectations. I model for you. These are my expectations when you're working together. These are my expectations if you're having a creative moment together. Follow my expectations. But I'm going to let you guys learn with each other while I go focus on these students right here. And then you monitor the classroom, but at the same time, you relinquish the control and allowing them to grow with each other while you're still being the great professional that you are, pushing those students that are with you forward. Does that make sense?
It makes way too much sense, and I don't want to agree that it's hard to answer that question. We're recording this in September, and I'm like, part of that is, do I trust did I go over procedures and expectations well enough? And how long does it take for me to develop that trust? But you're right. What's the worst that's going to happen? I have to step into a situation.
Yeah.
You
And
are absolutely correct.
You redirect. Like, if you see that they're not following your expectations, all right, boys and girls, let's come back together. That's not what I expect. Let me model for you. Let me show you. Let's do some role playing. And then you relinquish the control, because the children know, like, he doesn't trust us. Like, all the thing we do is just listen to him. So, Mr. Rogers, can we do it? It's like, no, we got it here. But allow them to do it so that you can be the modern day Mr. Rogers. So when they look back and say, it won't be the Mr. Rogers that was on television, it will be Mr. Matt Rogers.
So can I ask you a question about that? I feel like something like math instruction, where there's a logical right or wrong, is an easier thing to relinquish, because fairly immediately we're going to be able to pick up, when I relinquish that control, were you successful? I could see that working. How do you feel like you can do this? And I'll open this up to Ken too. Like, how do you feel like you can do that with more of the abstract subjects like social studies, or the science where they're making their own connections, or realistically, writing is a huge one, that whatever that prompt is, a great writer can be stumped by a hard prompt. So how do you kind of navigate those, where you're saying that redirection is hard to step in? You don't know if they're offline as easily as a subject like mathematics.
So here's where you become the facilitator. So when, for instance, if you're writing on a specific prompt, instead of you modeling the paragraph, you could say something like, all right, I want you to choose a partner. Or something I've done before is I allow the children to do clock partners. So I'll say, okay, today you're working with your 4 o'clock partner, and you guys are going to create your first paragraph and write your first paragraph on why do you think school is important. And then, so when they're working together, like, you can possibly say, here are my expectations. You write a sentence, your partner writes a sentence. Then you two read each other's sentences to see if you can say it a little bit better. And so after you model, you walk around and facilitate, and then you redirect if you see that they're not on task, but you're still trusting them to do the work. You're still trusting them to learn from each other, because you want all of your children to be engaged, right? And so if you're just lecturing them, all of your students are not engaged because they're just listening to you. Some of them may even be looking at you, but their mind is thinking on something else. But if they have no other choice but to work together and be together, then they're engaged with the academics. And if you have a student that says, I don't want to work with them, okay, well, you come and work with me. So then you're still engaged, whether you're working with me or working with your partner. If that makes sense.
I'd like to add on to that too. So if you go with that model of them working together, let's say with the writing piece, one of your main instructional goals is to make sure that they have a commanding opening sentence that's going to define the purpose of the paragraph or the multiple paragraphs. After they write a little bit, you talk about you have them reflect and review. If you were to pass this to another team, is there a sentence in your paragraph that defines the purpose of your paragraph? If not, add it. And then have them switch and have the other team highlight. They have one job. They have to highlight one sentence that is the defining sentence of that paragraph to say what the whole thing is about. Then they get it back and they get real-time feedback like, okay, we thought we had it, and they didn't pick what we thought. You get right into conclusion sentences with that, or transition words. Any skill you want to work on, you can say, here's the skill we're working on. Here's an example. If you want to model an example, this needs to be in your writing piece. And you, especially with writing, they have to give it to somebody else. And I had a really strict rule with peer editing. When you give your prompt to somebody else and they give it to you, you have to walk away from each other, because you can't sit there and say, oh, by the way, after this sentence, like, this is what I meant. Or, yeah, I know that's confusing, but I meant no. When you pick a book up from the library, you don't get to talk to the author to figure out what they meant. You read it and you get it or you don't. And so, pairing with what Anthony said there, yeah, you can totally pass that off. You don't have to model, okay, this is how we would start the prompt. This is the first sentence we would do. Then you go into your detail sentences. Then you go into your conclusion sentence. You let them figure it out as they go. And the more you do that, the better and better they're going to get with those skills, because they're getting that feedback from peers, and they're going to want their sentence highlighted that they thought should be highlighted.
And I want to jump in here too, because it's written all over your face. Like,
hang on, Matt, I think you need to buck up some bucks here to pay for this.
I know.
This
it feels like I got two
Anthony,
instructional coaches. Go ahead.
No, I can see the inside of you on your face, like saying, oh, I can't do it. Like, I can see that. And I just want to encourage you, like, the greatest way that your students can be successful is if they fail. You have to allow them to work together and to relinquish their control. Let them fail in the aspect of, okay, you didn't do it right. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to do it again. Okay, now you guys go out and learn again. I'm in here. I'm your facilitator. But at the same time, I'm allowing you to work with each other, learn from your mistakes so you'll know how to be better. It is hard for us as educators to do that, especially when we're seared in our mind. When my instructional coach came in and taught me how to do lattice method in front of the children, I was like, nope, not doing it that way. That's not how I learned it. It's confusing. And I said it out loud in front of the kids because I was like, nope, I don't know how to do it. But then when my kids started showing me how to do it too, and I started practicing, it is now my favorite way to do multiplication. But I had to be open to say, okay, let me learn it a different way. Let me do it a different way. And now I love it. So I want to encourage you, like, you're going to be okay. You just...
Yeah. Well,
so Matt, I will let you jump in, but I want to flip what you said in the beginning. You had said that you saw math as the easiest spot to start because it has a concrete, logical yes or no, right or wrong.
Just the acknowledgement
of these
whether
more
it's
open-ended.
Yep.
I also think sometimes that math is the hardest one for teachers to relinquish that control, because they feel like they have to teach the process in the correct order, in the correct way. The students have to learn it from them because there is no way they could figure it out not on their own. And some of those concepts are going to be, as you progress higher and higher in math, it's going to be harder and harder for students to figure it out. Comparing skills in elementary versus skills in high school, it's harder for students to figure it out. But if you are a master of that content, you should be able to figure out a way to guide your students into discovering the patterns themselves. So I'm preparing to work with another school next week, and I'm going to be modeling a fifth grade lesson. And I was digging through the archives of Mr. Ehrman, the fifth grade teacher, and I found this awesome activity I had where the students had to learn multiplying powers of 10 and dividing powers of 10, and how it, moves the decimal point to the right or to the left. And I set up, it was like a 5-page document that they used their calculator to type in different number sentences and see the result. And then it was prompts to have them describe, what pattern do you see? And they had to check in with me along the way. And the result was the students discovered that if you multiply by a power of 10, it moves the decimal point to the right for the number of zeros, divide the opposite. So I could have just told them that, but I created an opportunity for them to figure it out, and they conceptualized that a lot better.
All right, so here's where the tugging from inside is coming from. Anthony, to give you context, we got new curriculum a year and a half ago. At this point, we were told we were moving to a new curriculum, and so last year essentially was survival mode. I was looking at, I could preview a week before a lesson. I could preview the night before. I could preview moments before. I didn't really see it in action until it came out of my mouth, and what I saw from the kids, I could hear or see what they were doing. And I think what the beauty is, that sweet spot of once you've taught something 3 or 4 times, you can start putting your own flair into it. And so the hard part is we're not upper grades where I teach that lesson 3 times a day and then log it till next semester. I teach it this year 1 time. I wait 180 days to teach it again, and then I wait another 180 days to teach it again. And so where we see that scope and sequence come to life as an educator, that's the beauty of teaching. Oh, I understand why we're doing this activity, because it's going to lead to something in 2 weeks from now, and you're still going to need that skill, half a year from now, and you kind of feather all of that together. The hard part is when I don't feel, I know that I should see that, but I don't see it yet. And then it just sends you right back to, first day of teaching 101, where you're like, okay, I'm living by the manual. Here's where I am. This is survival mode. And I'm stepping 1 step away and stepping away with the hope that I'm like, this is not how I teach. This is not who I am. And I'm accepting that this is, how I have to muddle through, so that hopefully, I get that rhythm sooner than later, and it can shift to instead of Eureka or Great Minds lesson, into a Mr. Rogers with the backbone, or, the examples from. So all of those insecurities are they're screaming in my ear right now, but we've all gone through it. It's all framed in a different way, which is crazy, because last I checked, multiplication still ends the same way. Algebra still has the same components. ELA, main idea, is still always tough, regardless of what curriculum we cover. I've never found one that nails it on the head. So all of those really come down to the ideas of, trusting the students and modeling exactly that vulnerability you opened the show with. I don't know where I'm going, but it's okay. We're going to figure it out. We're going to get to the end result. We're going to stumble. We're going to fall. We're going to reteach, and all that's okay, but we're going to do it together. I just have to remember that when I walk in tomorrow at 8:00 and, kind of embody that, because that is, as you mentioned, you guys have both mentioned, that is the teaching that the kids deserve, whether I'm comfortable for it or not.
All right, so I want to be cognizant of our time here, and I want to transition into our exit ticket. Anthony, thank you for driving that. We always encourage our guests before we record to ask us questions, but very few of them do. So thank you for for pushing Matt and pushing our conversation a little bit. I really enjoyed that, and I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of that conversation.
We'll see
So
what
the
they
exit
say
ticket
about me
is
at the end. That's the thing. I don't know.
the exit ticket is the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. Question number 1: what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
Love them beyond the classroom. And what do I mean by that? Like, children know when you're just there just to teach it. Children know if you really care about them. Show them that you're interested in their outside life. If they play football, ask them about their game, ask them about their schedule. Go to a football game, just show up. If they're in ballerina school or have a dance recital, show up at a dance recital. It shows the children like, wow, like you really do care. And once children know that you care and love them, they'll do anything for you.
It is always so reward that next day that they come back to school. It is a totally different bond. You are absolutely correct.
And I just want to add to that, because we've had a couple of people say that, and I think it's so important. Although you should try to make that effort for every student, if you don't go to every student's baseball game, dance recital, it's okay, because they'll hear that you did it for others, and it still creates the same impact on other students, because they all see, wow, like I can't believe the teacher went to his game. Like, that's cool. And if they really care about it, they'll say, hey, Mr. Ehrman, why don't you come to my game? And I'll say, well, why don't you invite me? And maybe I will. And so the students that really want you there will ask for it. And it's okay if you don't go to something for every student. You should try to do as many as you can, but it's okay if you don't go to everyone, because you won't.
Totally agree. One of the
things, pace yourself.
Yeah. One of the things that I did is I did not believe in writing children up. And so I would tell my children, okay, I'm going to show up at your house. And there were times when I went to houses, knocking on their doors, and, you know, I would say, did they tell you that I was coming by? And the mom or the dad would be like, no, come on in. And they look like they seen a ghost when they walked. But when they get back to school, they'll say, y'all, he ain't playing. He really going to show up. Y'all better do it. But it switched the mindset of the children. So even with that, like, it let them know, like, whoa, this man really isn't playing with me. So, like, let me do what I'm supposed to do. But
and that's investment. Yeah.
Yeah. To this day, I have children that are now older. Like, some of them are juniors and seniors, and they'll still like inbox me or something, or their parent will contact me saying, you know, you're still his favorite teacher. He'll never forget you coming by the house, you know, things like that. So, yeah. Okay.
Do you feel like you can get away with that today? Do you think that's as acceptable?
I do. I
don't think there's anything wrong with it, but it's just my gut reaction when I hear that. It's like, ooh, that is, you know,
yeah,
I definitely a possibility.
I do, because it's we're on a public service job. So if we are trying to keep our children in school, why not exhaust all measures to keep them there? Having them at home, they're not going to learn. Why not exhaust all measures to make sure that they're staying in the building?
I couldn't agree more. Okay. So I cannot wait for this answer. It's a very simple question, unlike a lot of my questions I ask you. What's the best piece of advice you've gotten? And it could be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student.
The best piece of advice that I've gotten as I was a teacher, as I was younger, or period. Okay.
Anything that influenced you.
Okay. So it was a teacher who saved my life. And when I was taken into foster care, I was taken into foster care abruptly in the middle of my school day in front of all my classmates in the 4th grade. And my 4th grade teacher walked out, social services wouldn't tell her anything, but she bent down and she whispered in my ear. She said, Anthony, everything is going to be all right. So I entered the foster care system at age 9, and I stayed in the system until I aged out at age 21. So I began to get suspended and just make some bad choices because I just developed this attitude that I didn't care anymore because nobody cared for me. I didn't have parents. And my fourth grade teacher found me while I was in the system, and she had a conversation with me, and she said, Anthony, I want you to take all your anger and your bitterness and your frustration that you're experiencing right now and put it towards something and make something of yourself. What do you want to become? I said I wanted to be a teacher. And she was like, for what? We don't make any money. But then she said, if that's what you want to become, I'm going to stick with you. But you have to promise me that you're going to turn things around. And from there, I turned things around.
Boy, did you turn things around.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's incredible. So we'll go with this next. You know, the school year goes in waves. There are times where it's like, this is a breeze. You know, kids are doing what they need to. They're you know, living the dream. You're like, this is cake. And then there are days that we struggle. And there's some obvious ones, you know, parent teacher conferences, report cards can bring stress. But there's other, you know, features. What is something you could suggest an educator that's in that moment of struggle to power up and get through it and move on to those sunnier days?
It may seem cliche, but remember their why. Remember why they are serving children. Remember there was a reason why you wanted to become an educator. It wasn't for the money. I can guarantee you that you wanted to make a difference. And one thing you have to realize being an educator is sometimes on your hardest days with your roughest children, those will be the children that will grow up to say, you know what? I remember when you stayed on me, and it was because you stayed on me, you made me believe in myself. And thank you for being the teacher who saved my life. And so I encourage, even to this day, I encourage my teachers to know that they're making a difference every single day. And when they feel like that they're not, I go around and I humanize them and I say, thank you for showing up today. You didn't have to do it. You know, you could have said, I quit. This profession is a thankless profession, but you showed up again this morning. Thank you for being here. And validating how teachers feel. I had a teacher came to me and she said, Mr. Swann, I've been teaching 29 years and I've never had a principal to come and say good morning to me every morning. You don't know what that means to me. I appreciate you for being in this building. Thank you for being my assistant principal. So validating where they're at and just letting them know that what they're doing is not in vain and to keep going.
That's awesome. I love it. So it's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates teachers who constantly seek change, innovation, and pursuing new teaching strategies in their classroom?
One of the biggest rooms that everyone can be in is the room of improvement. And so no matter how long you've been teaching, making sure that you stay teachable. My first year teaching, my assistant principal sat down with me and he said, I'm never going to give you a perfect evaluation. And at first it took me aback, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, I know I'm a great teacher. And he told me, he was like, if I give you a perfect evaluation, you'll never grow. And I held on to those words for 16 years. And even being an assistant principal now, I'm reflective. I'm looking, how did I do? Like, did I do something wrong? Did I make a mistake here? Okay, I made a mistake. Okay, let me go back and apologize to this child because I corrected them and they were actually right. Having the restorative conversation. So just always making sure that you stay teachable. It will separate you from that teacher who thinks that they know everything when they really don't.
That was great. We've never had an answer like that. I love that answer.
I love that opening line of it as well. So I guess, Anthony, you've shared, sound bites aplenty, and it just, Ken will say something like this, but it is evident in what you share that your passion is completely in the right place, and that the teachers under you are lucky to have you. I know for myself, I'd love to continue learning from you. Are there ways that we can follow along with your journeys as, assistant principals, maybe through the experiences, your thoughts, or even, just to follow along as Mr. Swann, the person, because you just have so many gifts to give us?
Yes, sir. You can follow me on Twitter, and it's at 2021 VATOTY. Or my email is also 2021 Virginia Teacher of the Year at gmail.com. And if you need to contact me that way, you can. I try to stay present. I try to stay fighting for the profession of teaching and for our teachers and students, not just in my state, but across the nation. I'm connected with some amazing educators. And so we make sure that we advocate, although we're under attack, we make sure we stay together. And so if anyone would like to follow me like that or stay in contact with me like that, they can.
Thank you for sharing that. And as Matt said, your school is super, super lucky to have you as a leader in that building. Your kids were incredibly lucky to have you as a teacher, and the kids in your school community now are very, very lucky to have you as a leader of that building, because it's clear that relationships are important to you, and you're pursuing that with your teachers, but also with your students. And it is incredibly obvious why you received the award of 2021 Teacher of the Year for your state. So congratulations on that again. And just please keep doing what you're doing, because this conversation has been incredible. I've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed it. And I know our audience is going to be better for have listening to this show. So a couple of things that we talked about, as well as ways to connect with Anthony, can be found on our show notes page, which is powereduup.com/show90. You can follow us on social media at powereduup. You can follow Matt at EdTechNeighbor, as well as me at Ken Ehrman. So please engage with us, audience. As you listen, please leave us a rating and review. Shoot us a tweet, shoot us an email. Interact with us, because we're looking to interact with our rapidly growing audience a lot more, so we can learn with what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see more of, who you want to hear again. We're really looking to engage with our audience as much as possible. So Anthony, thank you again. And Matt, why don't you take us on out of here? And don't forget to possibly recognize maybe our fourth guest as well as you take us on out.
All right. So, Anthony, you have left us feeling powered up. I know personally, I got, some bonus assistance through our conversation, and I'm looking forward to getting in the classroom because you've left an impression. So as we power down this episode, thank you for what you do. Audience, thanks for bearing with, as Ken mentioned, our fourth guest, which happens to be a cricket in his basement, work in progress. More the merrier, I guess. But we look forward to the conversation next week. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.